Oi, boa tarde a todos, que é um prazer a gente estar retomando os webinars do IVEPESP, e hoje a gente tem, assim, a satisfação de ter com a gente aqui o professor Gerd Kortemeyer. Ele atualmente é o diretor de desenvolvimento educacional e de tecnologia do ETH de Zürich, né? Que talvez seja uma das melhores instituições da Europa, né, atualmente. Ele também é professor associado emérito da Michigan State University, que fica nos Estados Unidos também. E hoje a gente vai falar de um tema muito interessante, que seriam aplicações práticas do GPT na educação. Então, queria avisar vocês que, então, nesses primeiros minutos, os 30, 40 minutos de duração, o professor Gerd vai usar alguns slides e fazer uma apresentação sobre o tópico. Em seguida, a gente vai começar a abrir um tempo para perguntas, para discussões, nos 20 minutos finais, tá bom? Então, queria agradecer a presença, dizer que vocês podem, talvez pelas 3 plataformas, YouTube, LinkedIn ou Facebook, fazer perguntas e comentários, tá bom? Então, vamos dar início, obrigado. Então, eu passo a palavra diretamente para o professor Gerd, para que ele dê início à palestra dele. Por favor. Let's go, Gerd.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. And yeah, currently from Germany. I'm usually in Zurich, as Professor Diaz already said, but I'm currently here in Germany. I hope that the network connection is actually going to hold up. I'm in a hotel right now. So I prepared some slides.
Okay.
I need to see how I can get them to show. Okay, thank you very much. So I was going to talk about some practical applications of GPT in education, and it's basically just case studies and insights. So, I mean, all of you by now, of course, know GPT. Most anybody has played with it, but just by way of introduction, of course, that is generative pre-trained transformer. It says transfer, sorry, it's transformer. Deep down, that's no more than an autocomplete. And ChatGPT is a text-based interface to GPT. And that's very similar to what you do on your cell phone, on your smartphone, when you type a message. There's a little bar. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's a little bar that kind of predicts the next word that you might want to be typing. And that's on a word basis. So it kind of guesses what the next word is. And it does that based on the texts that you have sent in the past. And GPT sort of does the same thing, only that it has tokens, which are a little bit like syllables. And it just predicts the next token in the sequence. So it's nothing more than a probabilistic autocomplete. Also means that every time that you enter the same prompt, you get a different answer because it's probabilistic. Yes, you can turn down the temperature. That's one of the parameters, and it gets more deterministic, but by default, it's just probabilistic. The thing doesn't think, so it appears to be thinking. It acts sort of like a human, or at least sounds like one. And of course, sometimes it makes you wonder about yourself. Maybe I'm a probabilistic autocompleter. I'm not sure. I guess not. But yeah, the algorithms behind GPT aren't really that new. What's really new is the enormous text corpus that was used for training, and all of the investment that was made into fine-tuning the model. That's something that maybe only industry can really afford. Universities, it's very hard to invest all of that money into all these humans that did the fine-tuning. And the disruption is that some abilities seem to emerge, that you feel like the thing does something that it wasn't really trained for, and that caught people off guard. And so the following case studies are in higher education, highlighting some of those apparently emergent abilities And sorry, I'm a physicist by trade, so all of these examples are out of the realm of physics. So the first thing, I've been teaching an introductory physics course for probably about 20 years. And the first thing, of course, I was curious is, would this tool pass my physics course? Of course, all of the grade in the physics course is based on different assessments, and those assessments could be put into GPT, and one can see, would it pass? So this was done at the time with GPT 3.5. GPT-4 wasn't available yet. And so I prompted GPT with the assessment items for my course. Those are concept tests that we had. Those are homework problems, programming project, the clicker questions for peer instruction, the exam. And then I graded the solution that came out of GPT. It didn't have the multimodal input, so you couldn't directly feed images into the system. I just had the text-based interface to GPT 3.5 at my disposal. So whenever in physics we use a lot of figures, but whenever a figure showed up, I had to describe it in words. So you see this little figure there with the cannonball and possible trajectories that the cannonball could take, and I had to describe it. I had to say something like, in option E, the cannonball continues in a straight line along the original direction and then suddenly curves downward. So that was the only way how I could communicate figures to GPT. And that of course introduces some ambiguity in what I did there, because maybe sometimes my verbal description of the figure wasn't quite good. But it was the only way I could communicate with GPT. First thing I did with it was force concept inventory. That's something most physicists know. That's a 30-question multiple choice test, and it's used to assess the basic mastery of Newtonian physics. GPT is probabilistic, so as I said, for the same prompt, you get different responses every time. So I ran this 10 times. Basically did the whole force concept inventory 10 times. Of course, I got different answers every time, and I got different scores. So GPT 3.5 achieved scores in the range of 14 to 18 out of 30 points on that. If you look up the literature on the force concept inventory, that means that it is on the threshold of understanding Newtonian physics. GPT-4 gets much better scores, but at the time that wasn't available. So my guess is it would achieve about 80%. And that's a pretty good mastery of Newtonian physics. The homework, I just picked 76 different homework problems from the real course. In the real course, those were given with an online course management system, non-CAPA. So students in the real course were given 5 attempts. Somehow I had to simulate that. So I used the dialogue in ChatGPT to simulate those attempts. If ChatGPT was wrong, I basically prompted it to try again, or I gave it the same hints that the online system would have given. And then I just went through and saw, if it got it in 5 attempts, okay, it got credit. If it didn't get it within the 5 attempts, it didn't get credit. So GPT overall 3.5 got 55% of the homework in the course correct, and it used an average of 1.88 attempts to get to the correct solution for the problems that it solved. That's actually a very human value. So it kind of used the same number of attempts that human uses on the average. If they get a problem right, it's somewhere between 1 and 2 attempts, closer to 2 attempts. Clicker questions. So in my lecture, I always was posing questions, and students had these little radio devices where you can just type A, B, C, D, E as solutions. That's usually a tool for peer instruction. students would vote on one of these conceptual questions, and then depending on the answer distribution, I would decide if they should talk to each other, discuss the problem with each other, and then vote again. I basically replayed a whole lecture on momentum conservation, and I kind of knew from the original recording of the lecture where there was peer discussion and where there wasn't. So in case that there was peer discussion in the real lecture, I basically prompted ChatGPT to, give me a new solution. Sometimes when it was correct, I tried to confuse it. Or if it was wrong, I tried to, notch it toward the right answer. So what you see there in the figures, those are all the clicker questions from one lecture where you see two numbers. That was a peer discussion question. And there were also some participation points in the real lecture. So I also gave it that. I just graded it exactly like I would have graded a real lecture. So it got a score of 93% on that particular lecture on momentum conservation. Course had a programming project that's actually using a language called VPython. That's a visual extension to Python. Some of you may have used something like that. And so in the real course, students had to do a programming project with a little anharmonic oscillator where you have two charges and then there's a charge that's kind of oscillating back and forth. And so I was prompting GPT 3.5, basically up there, write a VPython animation for the following scenario. Two positive charges of 1 are placed at a position 0.10 and 0 minus 10 respectively. A negative charge starts at 1. Position of 1 starts at position minus 500 with a velocity of 1000. It wrote the simulation. It first had the sign of the electromagnetic force in the wrong direction, so it was always flying away, but prompted it to say, hey, the force points in the other direction. It fixed the program. Then there was a little bonus exercise where it would also supposed to plot the position of that blue charge. I said, make a plot of the x position of the blue charge. It did it. Students would have gotten bonus for that. Then when I went to grading the problem, though, it was wrong. When it made the unit vector for the direction, it didn't subtract by the magnitude of the vector. So it made a very, very typical student mistake that wasn't obvious just looking at the charge going back and forth. And so it didn't get a perfect score. It got 90% on this. It lost points for having forgotten to divide by the magnitude. It gained bonus points for having made the plot. So score of 90%, I think, is a really, really good programmer. Exams were multiple choice. So I took 30 typical problems from the exams in that course. And GPT got a score of 47% on the exams. And if I put that all together, the way that my course was graded, you got 20% of the grade for the homework, 5% for the clicker questions, 5% for the programming exercises, and 70% for the exams. Those were midterm exams, final exams. So if I put that all together, GPT 3.5 would have achieved 53% of the grade. 53% means that if that were a student, they would get credit for the course. They wouldn't have to repeat it. They would get credit for it. It's, however, below what they need to have on the average for graduation. They would need an average grade of a 2.0 in the United States or at Michigan State to graduate, and this would have been a 1.5 or something like that. So would have passed the course, would not have gotten enough points to graduate with that. And when I looked at where did it lose most of its points, it lost most of the points not for conceptual reasons. It lost most of the points due to errors in numerical and symbolic calculations. That's surprising for a computer, but remember, it's a language model. It's not a calculation model. And then I did once GPT-4 became available, I did like a subset of the tests that I did with 3.5. GPT-4 would have gotten 80%. And 80%, that's a solid physics score. So if all courses at the university were like that, then GPT could graduate from college. Interesting. Which then brought me to the other side. Maybe AI can actually also grade. And that would be quite interesting. Not necessarily for the high stake big exams, but for little exams or quizzes. If you want to give your student frequent feedback on how they're doing in the course, you might want to have lots of little small quizzes or things like that. And, grading those by hand is kind of painful. Maybe AI can do that. So one of the difficulties or challenges in many of the STEM disciplines is that, of course, oftentimes the way how you arrive at a solution is almost as important as the final answer. If you work your way through a problem, through the derivation of an answer, and you do pretty well on that, and then you make a mistake calculating the final answer, you still get quite some points, quite some partial credit for having started off the right way and for the correct derivations. And of course, there's a lot of mathematics going on. So challenging for many of these things would be the mathematical notation that you have to deal with. So in exam situation, you couldn't really ask your students to typeset all of these equations. That would be just very distracting from the task of solving a physics problem. Would be if you had to type that in and format it and do all of those with mathematical formulas. So typically, paper and pencil are the natural way to do these derivations of solutions. And one of the workflows you could imagine is that you scan the student papers to a PDF, just using your copy machine. Then you translate the scanned solutions to LaTeX using AI. So like with a multimodal GPT, Professor Diaz and I just before this webinar talked about the multimodal input and how you can take PDFs and basically have AI read them. That wasn't available yet at the time when I was doing this study here. But then once you have a LaTeX source for or translated the written solution into LaTeX, I could test already, is it possible to grade the LaTeX of this? And you do that and you register the grades. So in the study that I'm going to present to you, it's just the last step here from a LaTeX document to the grades. Yep. So what I did is, of course, it's kind of painful trying to get 25 different solutions to a problem and typing them all in LaTeX and somehow making sure that some of them are right and some of them are wrong and that they are wrong in different ways. So frankly, I was lazy and I just said, okay, I need 25 LaTeX formatted solutions to a problem. How do I generate those? I don't want to write them myself. So I had GPT generate those. And I used different models. I used the legacy GPT-3. I used the default GPT-3 and GPT-4 to generate solutions to a problem. And then, yes, GPT eventually was grading itself. I had that go through. So, but at the same time, I looked at those solutions that GPT generated. And they were very much like student work. So I don't think it was so wrong to have GPT grade itself. It's a probabilistic tool. It kind of worked. Here was the prompt. So how did I make my sample solutions? I just said at t equals 0, a resistor, resistance 10 ohms, is connected across a fully charged capacitor, voltage 5 volts, capacitance is 100 millifarad. At what time t2 does half the initial current flow through the resistor? And then just some statement to GPT, do not use display LaTeX, only inline LaTeX. And that was just for my copy pasting the thing out. I just needed everything in inline LaTeX, so I get pure text. So that was my prompt. That's the problem. Basically, just a discharging capacitor and wondering or calculating at what time half of the initial current is flowing. Some of the information in the problem is not really needed to solve the problem. And it was interesting to see if in the solutions that were generated, the unneeded information was still used and stuff was calculated without really having to calculate it. So here are examples for those sample solutions. One of the solutions was like, we can use the RC circuit equations to find the time, and then it derived it here. That came, I believe, out of GPT-4. Or here's another one, solution 4, to find the time when half the initial current flows through the resistor, blah, 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 blah. And you see that's the LaTeX. And that is the way how I generated 25 different solutions to the same problem. Basically giving the same prompt several times to different versions of GPT. So that was my sample. That's what I started with. And then the grading step had a different prompt. Consider the following numbered solutions to this problem. And there's the problem. I just repeated the problem. Grade them from 0, worst, to 4, best, in terms of each correctness of argumentation, symbolic correctness, numerical correctness, and straightforwardness. Provide these grades in a comma-separated format, blah, blah. So just that I wanted a table coming out of it. But basically, grade these things in terms of correctness of argumentation, symbolic correctness, numerical correctness, and straightforwardness. Also, I prompted it to give me a one-sentence feedback on the solution. And I wanted a similarity measure between the solutions that I'd sent in. And since it's probabilistic, I didn't just grade it once. I basically graded everything 15 times. Just so I have, a range of what GPT would come up with as a grade. And so, yeah, the grading step, I compiled all of these scores that I got out of it. So now you have averages of the scores in each one of the rubric points. And I got standard deviations on it. So you would see where there was a lot of insecurity and where there was less insecurity on the grade that it came up with. And I also took these one-sentence feedbacks that I had asked for, and I had GPT summarize those for me. So for each one of the problems now, I had 4 rubric grades with standard deviations, and then I had a compilation of the one-sentence feedbacks that GPT gave on those solutions. So what I found, and then of course I graded all of that by hand. So I went through these 25 different problems solutions that I generated. I graded them by hand and gave my personal feedback about the solution. And then came the task of comparing. So if I look at the feedback and compared that to my manual feedback that I would have given, overall there was fairly good agreement. So what came out of GPT would have been useful to students as feedback on their solutions, except for a very few confusing outliers. So I've use the idiom there, take it with a grain of salt. Usually the feedback you get from GPT would be useful as a student, but sometimes it's just off base. It's just outliers. So have to be a little bit careful there. Then I calculate the overall grade on the problems on 20% correctness, 20% symbolic correctness, 40% numerical correctness, and 20% straightforwardness. So I've been weighing the rubric like I would do it in class. And I got this graph here for the agreement between the manual grading and the AI grading. You see there are rather big standard deviations, rather big arrow bars. Each one of those dots is one of those 25 solutions, of course. You see that there actually are aligning, and the R squared between that is 0.83. That's actually a pretty good correlation. There is a pretty good correlation between the manual grade and the AI grade. Definitely good enough for formative feedback. If you just need to tell the student how well they have been doing, that's a step forward. But it's not good enough for exams. So I would not trust at the moment the AI grade on any kind of high-stake exams. But for formative feedback to the students, it's pretty good. I did some clustering. I had this similarity measure that I had. I also clustered on grades. And the AI clustering kind of underestimates the grade of the students. The similarity clustering overestimates. But I could essentially triage. And I could look at the low performing, the medium, and the high. And if I look at that, I could just basically, if I get a whole stack of exams, I can kind of filter out the exams that are really, really good. And I can filter out the exams that are really, really bad. And it's probably right on that. And then there's this middle, medium performance. And that's the things that I would really have to look at by hand. So it could give you a pre-sorting, pre-clustering of what are good and what are bad solutions, and what are medium solutions that you should look at again. The prompts are kind of made up, so better prompts might have helped to get more accuracy on these kind of measures. But, you know, there's promise. The last case study that I wanted to present you is, can I use AI to make content accessible to blind people? And that's a big topic at the moment at our university. We have a mandate that essentially all of the teaching content should also be accessible by students who have disabilities, who are blind, who are hard of hearing, things like that. So that's not easy. For all the videos we make, we have to produce subtitles. But what about all of our lecture scripts? The lecture scripts, at least at European universities, are usually made by the professor. You have your individual script. And of course, this being a technical university, most of those are in LaTeX because they include just a lot of math. And usually what comes out of it is a PDF. And PDF files are notoriously bad when it comes to accessibility for blind people. So what can we do? Can somehow AI help here? So usually blind people access electronic content using screen reader software. Screen reader software allows you to navigate a content, navigate content just using your keypad, just your keyboard. And also blind people are having read the document to them. I don't know if you've ever seen a blind person and a screen reader. It's kind of amazing when you see a blind person surfing the web. the thing reads back the text that's on the web page at incredible speeds that I personally could never follow at the speed that it's being read to those people, but it's fairly amazing. So it's hard to describe, but it's essentially a screen reading software. But that fails when you have a formula, because formula lives by being a two-dimensional layout. And how do you read that? And this is where I think AI can help. Navigating content, how do blind people navigate it? Basically, you have to go by document structure. You have to rely that when there's a new section starting in the document, that it's actually marked up as a section. Not just taking the font and making the font bigger and making it boldface. That's a good clue for a seeing person, but that doesn't work for a blind person. You really need the screen reader software needs that sections are marked as sections, tables that the columns are marked up as columns. When you have like links within the paper, reference up here, reference down there, those actually need to be links so that the screen reader software can follow the links. All of these standards are in the web accessibility guidelines. There's a norm for that, WCAG, and that's the norm that we are supposed to follow at our university, and it's challenging with mathematical content. Yeah, I just said that. If you know a little bit of LaTeX, a little bit of HTML, yeah, you need to do sections, you need to do H1, H2, stuff like that. You need to use TR, TD, you need to use A for anchors so that really the thing is understandable for a screen reader software. Reading formulas. So here's just, triple integral. How do you read that? I mean, you want to read it in the way the integral of the density rho as a function of the radius r and the angles phi and theta between the inner boundary of Ri and upper boundary. So when you are reading a formula and you're reading it to a person, you as a human, you are making sense of it. What you don't do is just go through and say integral sign, blah, blah, integral sign, blah, blah. You don't go linearly through it. You actually make sense of it, and that's where we need to help the screen reader software. So what I did is I made a sample document. It's probably too small to see on your screen, but I basically put in everything nasty that I could think of into this little document here. I made a 2-column. That's something that screen reading software enormously struggles with. I put in formulas, I put in matrices, I put in tables, I put in figures, I put in references. So basically anything nasty that I could think of in a scientific paper, I put into this little sample document. And then I try to see, can GPT translate this LaTeX document into an HTML document that is screen reader compatible? And GPT being a language model, the hopes were pretty high. So prompt to translate. Then I had LaTeX and BibTeX, just pasted below. And I also did that twice just to test. So here's the prompt I gave it. Translate the following LaTeX and BibTeX into screen reader accessible HTML, translating the formulas into English, including the indices, and translating labels and citations into anchors and links. For figures, just give the description in English, no code for embedding an image. The prompt became kind of complicated. You see in brackets, I had to add including the indices. That is because I had a matrix multiplication in there, and GPT just realized, oh, that's a matrix. It's a matrix multiplication. It was with Einstein notation, with covariant, contravariant indices, and it just did the Einstein and just said, okay, this is a matrix multiplication. So I'm just going to narrate the formula. You multiply this matrix with this vector. But I actually wanted the indices. I didn't want it to interpret. I just wanted to intelligently read. So I had to slow it down. It understood more of the formula than I wanted it to, say at that time. And also for images, I tried to, have all of the embed code. I didn't really need that. I just needed the description of the image. And then after this prompt, I just included the document style, APS, reprint, blah, 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 blah. So what did it do? This is an output, one of the outputs. And of course, the first thing you could tell me is this looks nothing like the beautiful PDF document, right? So here's the PDF document with all of its nice formulas and with all of this, looks really beautiful. This looks nothing like it. Well, it doesn't have to, because it's for blind people. So it doesn't matter what this looks like. It just needs to be readable by screen reader software. And yeah, let's see if that works. So first test was formulas. Up there you see the LaTeX source, begin equation, OI int, vec e, c dot, blah, blah. It renders in PDF like one of the Maxwell equations. And then comes the important part, how does GPT narrate this? And one of the narrations was the closed integral of E dot ds equals 1 over epsilon 0 times the triple integral of rho dv. That's kind of really concise, but I mean, a professional physicist would hear this and say, yeah, I can imagine the formula in my head, makes sense to me. The second version looked a little different. The surface integral over the vector E dotted with the infinitesimal area vector ds equals 1 over the permittivity of free space times the volume integral over the volume charge density times the infinitesimal volume dv. If I was an undergraduate student, I would probably prefer the second version here, because it also tells me that this is the density and stuff like that. If I was a professional physicist, I would prefer the first version. But both of these versions that GPT generated make sense. And both of these would be accessible to a screen reader. So that would work beautifully. It could just speak it. It could just narrate the formula. How did it deal with links and references? So up here, it says in the original source, it cites something, and then it also references an equation earlier in the document. In PDF, it looks like this. Gives me the citation 5 and also remember equation 2. And then in the reading, GPT generated the correct anchors in the text. And then the thing says, but don't panic. And it gives me the jumping anchor to go up, to go down to the correct reference. And it also generated the correct anchor to jump up to the equation that I was referencing. So this is really wonderful. Screen reader software, when you go over it, you could decide if you want to follow the link or not. And it would jump at the right position in the document, the thing that was referenced. So just worked really well. Tables, it translated beautifully. So here's begin table, caption, blah, blah, blah. In PDF, it looks like that. ChatGPT made out of it table, ID, tab formulas, caption, some relativistic formulas, TR, and it even knew that the thing are table headings, so it made TH, 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 TR. So a screen reader software immediately could see from this that a new table is starting. It has 3 different columns. These are the headings for the columns. So a screen reader software has everything at its disposal to read this table correctly and to navigate the table correctly. The figure was made with a tool called TIX. That's pretty popular among LaTeX aficionados to actually use LaTeX itself to make figures. And it looks a little bit cryptic, draw, dotted, thick, and then it gives coordinates. But basically, I wanted to have a rotated, like an original coordinate system, and a rotated coordinate system, rotated by an angle theta. And the absolute beauty of this was, of course, GPT can't see the figure. All it gets are these vector definitions up there. But what it made out of it is a coordinate system is represented with X and Y axis. Nowhere did it say that those are X and Y axis, but the way that X and Y are placed next to those arrows there sure looks like a coordinate system to the eye. GPT also recognized that it's a coordinate system. And then 2 additional axes, X prime and Y prime, are represented. Those are the other ones. And rotated from the original X and Y axis by an angle theta. Also, that is fairly amazing, because all I did is I smacked a theta into a certain position there, and GPT recognized that apparently that's the angle between those 2 coordinate systems. So imagine being a blind person, and GPT, all you have in the PDF document is the figure, but a blind person, it would read to you a coordinate system is represented with X and Y axis, blah, 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 blah. You could draw this in your head. So from that description alone, you would know what this figure shows. I think that's a beautiful representation translation that was done there by GPT. So overall, did very well translating between LaTeX and HTML. It did make sense of the formulas and figures. Sometimes the one, sometimes the other one of those 2 translations. I didn't show you much of the second translation, was a little better. One could probably write a tool that for everything that needs to be represented there just automatically makes more than 1 representation and embeds it. Or you could just give the LaTeX source code to the blind person and they could locally translate it. I just found it very promising using AI as an accessibility tool to make mathematical documents screen reader compatible. Okay, what next? Of course, nobody has a crystal ball. I believe AI is just going to be a commodity in the future, just like everyone's cell phone. And, you don't use paper maps anymore. You pull up the map on your cell phone. So, it just becomes a commodity. So yeah, GPT-3 sure was disruptive and a wake-up call for academia, since writing is so central to what we do. However, AI is already in all kinds of devices. Oftentimes we don't even know that it's in there, and has a lot of practical applications. It's not likely going to go away. So it's a tool. I don't think there's any sense in fighting it. That would be like Don Quixote going up against the windmills. There's no sense fighting AI. So our students later on will use it in their professional lives. So we better teach them how to use it. And yes, that's responsible and ethical use. And that's also distinguishing truth versus fake news and the hallucinations that these tools have. And eventually it'll just be commoditized, just like all the modern communications, like the tool we are using right now for streaming this. That was unthinkable when I was a college student. I could never have imagined this kind of video streaming chat that we're doing here right now across continents. And now it seems like the most normal thing in the world. So I think the same way that this tool we are just using here is just, yeah, sure, let's have a video conference. Yeah, the surprise is over and the commoditization is going to set in. And I believe that's all that there was. And I am 6 minutes over time. I'm sorry. Okay, so thank you. I don't know how to get out of the presentation mode. Thank you.
Very good, Gerd. Yes, I think that your presentation showed that many things that one physicist before needed to do, like, for example, write paper, for example, using normally formulas and tal. So all this chat GPT, I think that in perhaps more weeks, the results, I think that each week will be better, no? Because I think that the question is for us, what's your future, our future? You know, to write papers. All these, I think that ChatGPT can do for us. No.
Well, yeah, ChatGPT can write papers, and future versions of AI can write better papers. I still cannot quite imagine the thing having the same kind of metacognition that a human have. So basically, when we are doing physics, you and I, we write something and we constantly question ourselves, is this even right? Can this be right? We look at the same thing from different angles. And I think AI currently has very much a one-track mind. It just goes autocomplete, hacks through it. It doesn't have the self-awareness that we have. I think that will take a while till that's there. So a good paper is something where you constantly question yourself, and currently the AI tool doesn't question itself. Maybe it will in the future, but currently it just plows along. So I think, yes, it can write a research paper, but will it be a good paper? At the moment, kind of doubt it.
Okay.
What it means, so...
Yes,
please.
Continue.
No, I mean, what it means for our students is, of course, they're going to grow up into a world where there's even more AI. And I think we need to prepare them now. They need to do the metacognition for the AI tool that the AI tool currently doesn't do. So constantly questioning the output of it, I think, is important. I think the issue of hallucinations, where that's a technical term, I believe, that the thing just sells something as the truth, even though it's not, that's not going to go away so soon. So the students have to be the ones who critically evaluate what comes out of those tools. We have to teach them that, how they can check the output of that, or otherwise we'll have crashing airplanes and breaking down bridges, because blind trust into that system, I think, is dangerous. Our problems will become harder. So our exams, I think, what we currently think about is even splitting the exam, having some part of the exam that is paper and pencil only, nothing else. And that's about the basic skills, the knowledge that you need to have. Then maybe having the second part of the exam and just having everything available. Just they can use whatever they want. They can use any AI tool they want, whatever works for them. But then those problems are going to be very hard. So I think, at least when we look at our learning goals for our classes, they will shift towards the harder things, because some of the easy things can be done by AI.
No, yes. I remember when I was in Michigan, we talk about Long Kappa, and well, they do many very good things. So one thing is how you using low kappa to correct, well, some exams that is by hand, you know. So you show that this chat GPT can do this easily, you know, to do the correction of the exams, you know.
At least do a triage on it. I mean, depends on how high stake it is. If the whole course grade depends on it, no, I wouldn't trust the AI. If it's a little quiz that I'm just, you know, little weekly quizzes that I give to the students, you know, might as well. If it doesn't really decide much about the grade, and then the students can still look at the grading and say, I agree with that, or I don't, and then we can have a dialogue about it. So I think it's very situation dependent if I would currently use AI for grading or not. And yes, little quizzes, homework, sure, let's try it. And we probably will try that out. We have to look at privacy. That's currently the question that we haven't quite solved yet. In the study that I showed, I mean, those were just GPT generated solutions. There was nobody's privacy involved. When you start grading student work using AI, then privacy is an issue because, you know, all of that thing, who knows where all that data is actually flowing. So that's that's a little bit of a thing we still need to solve, is the student privacy.
Well, you, at this moment, in your institution, you have the position of Director of Education Development, which you think that for now, with the ChatGPT, which will be the more convenient pedagogy to implement for the students in this present and the future? How you think that will be the best model, the pedagogy that you need to use for now?
I don't say we are just very actively thinking about it. I have to admit that we were, like many other people, taken by surprise. And yes, by now it's 6 months ago. But 6 months ago, we were surprised by what happened. We are still working on the pedagogies that go with it. We made one decision very, very early. And the early decision was we're not going to prohibit use of it. We wrote a little opinion piece about how artificial intelligence is not like a pandemic. I mean, like 2.5 years ago, so the world was taken by surprise by COVID. And then, of course, we had to implement a lot of rules for social interaction because we needed to stop a pandemic. And there was a lot of quick action and quick rules, and let's make a rule for this and let's make a rule against that. I don't know how it was in Switzerland, how it was in Brazil, but at least in Switzerland there were like all kinds of rules, things you couldn't do anymore. Like very quickly, a lot of rules. Some of them didn't make sense. Some of them were contradictory, and we don't want to repeat that mistake. Well, it wasn't a mistake back then. We had to stop a deadly pandemic. But basically, the argumentation is AI is not a pandemic, so there's no need for blind actionism and immediately putting all kinds of rules into place. We can allow ourselves a little bit more time to get acquainted with it. And yes, definitely it will be incorporated into our teaching. The thing we also want to be careful about is equality. We talked a little bit earlier about how you and I both have, you know, $20 a month to buy a more advanced version of AI. I think that's only the beginning. And I mean, $20, yeah, okay, it's money. But $20 a month, it's okay. But I don't know how long it's going to take till you can buy the gold version for $40 and the platinum version for $60 or whatever. So eventually, I don't want this to become an economic race between the students. I don't want that the richer students have access to the better AI tools and therefore get better grades. So that can't happen. We haven't come to grips with that either. Are we going to buy licenses for our students? Maybe we should, so that we that there are that economic imbalances don't matter here. All kinds of open questions. But yeah, $20 a month. Who knows how long that lasts? I'm sure there's going to be more expensive options pretty soon.
Yes. Yes, I think that in your presentation, I think that you can explain, for example, how you incorporate the LECTS in ChatGPT. How you do this implementation?
How do I acoustically? I just had a little audio glitch. How do I incorporate
the LaTeX in the ChatGPT because ChatGPT only understand text, test.
Yeah.
How you do this?
It's the nice thing about the LaTeX source code. So the source code deep down, that is just 7-bit ASCII. So the source code of the LaTeX documents is just characters. And so it does understand those characters. I mean, as soon as you make a PDF out of it, it's all different. But the source code itself is pure text, and that's the beauty of it. Okay. And that's why I was able to feed it into ChatGPT without having access to any kind of the more fancy plugins that are available today. Actually, they are not available to me in Switzerland. We also talked about that. Interestingly enough, all we have access to from Switzerland is just a plain text input. But fortunately, the LaTeX file is plain text, the source file of it. Okay. So, yeah.
In one thing that, for example, the ChatGPT can write programs, no?
Yep.
At this moment. What do you think that normally in basic schools here in Brazil, it's important to teach programmation for this student, computation, with this ChatGPT, how you think that this thing is now you will be changed? Because if you have software like ChatGPT that can do this programmation, well, I needed to program in Python or ISO to do something. You think that is important to teach this in the fundamental schools?
We are just thinking about, are we going to still teach Python at ETH Zurich? So I talked to my computer science colleagues and I said, hey, you have this course, Introduction to Python. What are you going to do with your course, Introduction to Python? And the colleague said, we have to basically trash it. There is really no, or completely rework it. So we also had a big effort coming out of my department of implementing Jupyter notebooks. I don't know if those are popular in Brazil, but they're quite popular here. That's like little, like interactive worksheets where you can incorporate Python code or R code, that statistical tool. And we had just developed a whole bunch of these interactive worksheets with learning Python and learning R. And now ChatGPT does that in 5 seconds. we haven't come to grips with that, but our introduction to Python course, our introduction to R course, we can basically take it and put it in the trash. I don't know yet what we do instead. But the way that this tool can program, it usually doesn't get it right on the first try. You might have to prompt it again and maybe prompt it again. What the students will need are debugging skills. What the students will need are program testing skills. How do I verify that a program is actually correct? So instead of writing a program, which the thing can do, it's how do I test it? How do I make sure that the program is really correct? And we somehow need to teach that. But that's a different skill set. And well, we have to learn. We don't know yet. But yeah, computer science says introduction to Python.
Yeah. Well, Gerd, for the students, say something, what you think that they need to focus, from the present for the future, to, in fact, have some job, what's the thing that you need for these students for now and for the future?
I guess I'm very much a traditionalist, and I think that everybody still needs to learn basic mathematics. I think everybody still should learn basic physics, basic chemistry. You need to be able to make sense of the world. And I don't think that artificial intelligence is gonna. It's a very powerful tool, but like with every single tool, you still need to know how to use it and how to evaluate the results. And for that, I think you still need a very solid foundation in mathematics and physics. You also still need to understand writing, so you can, understand, evaluate that. So I think the need for a solid foundation is not going to go away. And then once you know that, you can use the tool to do routine work, but you still know what it's doing. And that one doesn't go away. Some people have gone so far of saying, we don't really need to teach math anymore because look, the tool can do it. And I think that is a very, very dangerous thing. And I don't want to fly in an airplane that has been designed by AI alone with no human understanding anymore what in the world is going on. Somebody still need that knowledge. Maybe I'm a traditionalist, but yes, I don't think
Yes. Yeah, the important is that the artificial intelligence you not take your job. The people that know the intelligence that can take your job. So it's important to continue to have a solid formation in physics, mathematics. So, but also to have to learn the intelligence artificial, because this is important also. You cannot avoid this,
No, you can't avoid it. You will need to learn how to use, and I think most of all, you also need to learn how to keep learning, because I think the days are over when you got your university education and then you have your education for life. I mean, as fast as everything is changing, I think another thing that you need to learn at university is how to learn, because you're going to have to keep on learning. The world is changing so fast. Can't just sit back, relax, enjoy the show. That won't work, because then you're going to be out of a job. So, yeah.
Yes. Well, Gerd, thank you very much for your.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
I'm very happy. So to finish, I pass for you to give your final consideration to finish this webinar. Please.
Well, all I can do is we are on a journey here. I'm very glad that we could have this exchange here, because as humans, we need to keep talking about this. As humans, we need to figure this out. So I thank you for the opportunity to just as humans talk about artificial intelligence. So thank you for the invitation.
Okay, by all the people that are in all the LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook. Thank you for, and this presentation will stay now. I'll finish for the people that can see in any moment.
Okay.
So thank you very much, and until the next. Thank you, Gerd.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thanks.